everyone. Thank you for joining our D&I session this afternoon. Just so you know, I will have the tablet here, and so if you have any questions for the panel, please put it in your app and send it, and I will read them as we go. My name is Emilie. I'm a partner at Mosaic, and I will be facilitating this panel today. And we've got three awesome people with us today. I will let you introduce yourselves, please. Yes.
Kia ora tātou katoa, ko Yasmin, Frazer, tōku ingoa. I am lucky enough to be the learning lead at Te Ara Hunga Ora, the Retirement Commission, sorted in school. So I am lucky enough to lead alongside my awesome team down the front here, some cool learning in the school space. So kia ora, glad to be here today.
Tēnā koutou tā katoa. I'm Shelley Dunmore, and it's a pleasure to be here on this panel as well. So I look after a program at ASB called GetWise. It's our youth financial literacy program that's available to primary and intermediate students. We've been offering that program for 15 years. So we've got a team of facilitators that go out and deliver that into classrooms. But in terms of what ASB also does, I mean, we've had a long legacy supporting kids right back from, school banking days, and a lot of you in the room will probably remember taking your coins in your bank book, doing school banking. You probably remember the cash and money boxes, and I guess those foundations really instilled great savings habits. And what we know is that kids that learn those financial literacy skills early definitely have better outcomes later in life.
Awesome. Afternoon, everyone. My name's Simon. I'm CEO at Banqer. We're an online financial education provider that operates throughout Australasian schools. We've been going for near on 10 years now, have reached over 500,000 students. We take a similar approach to financial education. So essentially students have their own mock online bank accounts, they earn a fictitious wage, they pay expenses, and then they experience a variety of different financial concepts, just like you and I do in the real world.
Thank you very much. So our session today is Resilience and Prosperity for Generation Alpha. So we had a little bit of a look, and actually it's kids that are born from 2010 to will be born in 2025. So it's actually quite a broad range, and I think this is a generation that is more turned with social media and who has access to a lot of information. But how do you think has worked so far in what you've encountered in your respective jobs? What has worked for financial literacy, and what do you think can be done more?
Good question. From my perspective, a lot of what we're doing is working. I think maybe the situation around the financial capability, the financial preparedness of our younger generation isn't as dire as what it sometimes gets made out to be. We've done a bit of research recently, or engaged with students, our younger secondary school students, and I mean, for me, the positivity of the responses was interesting. I mean, we found that sort of the majority of them considered themselves to be good or great with money. The majority, 90%, reported talking about money at home. 74% had a bank account, 73% reported savings money regularly, and 67% reported a positive relationship with money. So to my mind, we are doing good things in the ecosystem, and there's a lot of great providers out there. I just think the consistency with which we're doing it isn't enough. I think we still leave financial education to chance too much, whether that be in schools or at home, and so we just need to ensure that every young Kiwi has the opportunity to access financial education.
Yeah, I totally agree, and just to build on that, I think if you want to be effective, it needs to be fun and engaging and age appropriate. That's really key, and I think what we're thinking about a lot at the moment is how we extend that learning beyond the classroom too, because kids may be exposed to GetWise or Banqer or Sorted in schools, But there's also some kids that don't get any financial education, so they leave that school gate without having foundational money skills, so there are gaps. So it is that whole working together as an ecosystem, that whole partnership piece becomes really, really important. But as I say, we're also thinking about how do we make sure that they're having those conversations at home, that the whānau are engaged, that they're putting into practice also, because, and I guess the analogy I quite often use is rugby, right? You know, you can get the skills, but you need to practice to get better. And it's very much like financial capability. So you can learn the skills in school, but if you're not practicing, you're not going to get behavioural change. And ideally, that's what we want with this next generation.
Yasmin?
Yeah, I think I can probably talk a lot about from what both these guys have talked about. We talk a lot between ourselves. We've got good relationships in the sector, and it's happening out there. Financial education is happening probably more than we think. We often talk about that frustration of hearing people say, oh, there's no financial literacy in school, but it actually is. But I think what that tells us is it's maybe not explicit enough. And we need it to be so explicit that people are going home and having those conversations about that happening at school as well. And I think the other thing about how it's happening is, I think that there's, in terms of financial education in schools, there's a big focus on personal finances and understanding those systems and how you might go about that and good money behaviours and habits. But as well as no sort of cohesive approach to that, we're also missing some education on some of those core fundamental systems, economic systems like tax, like understanding a national budget, inflation. What is an inflation apart from something to be frustrated at? So if we're not introducing understanding of those types of systems in the school space, we need to know when we're teaching certain concepts and why. You don't just teach it at year 4 because you think it's a good idea. There's reasons, there's research behind that. So there needs to be sort of probably a bit more of a cohesive approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you were saying, it has to be age appropriate, and then you talk about tax, I was thinking that's going to be a hard one, I think, to put in school. So what is, according to you then, if at school we can see there's some great programs happening, how do we move beyond school as a collective? How do we move, as you said, with the whānau and the families, and how can we make the kids maybe a bit more adventurous when it comes to that outside of the classroom?
I think that comes back to what we were mentioning before. If we make it more explicit in schools, those conversations may be happening in homes, and there's some good research saying they are. But what we do know is that some research came out that said by about 7 we've formed some basic habits and behaviours around money. So we know that a lot of the learnings are coming from the home environment. That doesn't mean it can't be modified or changed. So even if we're not talking to young people at home about money, which we hopefully should be as much as possible, they're hearing it, they're seeing the impact on wellbeing. So if we've got a coordinated approach in the school system, we've got key concepts that we're teaching at certain ages. That makes it easier for schools to have conversations with their community. It means it's easier understood what they're learning. It can be quite frightening sometimes, particularly as your kids get into those older years of schooling, to know what's going on in those classrooms for them. And I think schools actually do an exceptional job of trying to engage the community on really important topics. And I think being such a critical life skill, financial capability would be something that they would end up engaging with if there was a coordinated and really clear approach to how we teach that in schools. So I think schools want to do it. We know teachers want to do it. We know whānau and communities want those conversations to happen. And we know there's amazing programs happening, not just in the school sector, but in the adult sector. Our org does workplace, communities. We've got sort of kāinga ora, Pacific Pathways to Home Ownership partnerships. There's heaps of really cool stuff happening. And we, much like Shelley was talking about, are starting to try and connect those dots as well. We've got a hui coming up where we're working with our community and our whānau and kura in our Māori medium education space with our Tiri Tō program to teach them as a whole. So it's happening out there, it's connecting the dots.
I totally agree. And just to kind of build on that comment about the role of parents, whānau, community, they play a really important role, because what we do know is that young people learn their financial behaviours are role modelled, particularly by their parents. And there's often discussions are not happening in the home, and also pocket money doesn't seem to. I guess it's not everyone gets pocket money, but I guess the best thing that I think parents could do at home, and it's something that I did with my kids, is have simple things like a chore chart, right? And then give the kids pocket money for doing jobs. Some jobs will be paid for, making their beds, maybe not. And then just a simple concept like having a spend, save, share jar, and having your savings goal actually written on the save jar, because then that way you're less likely to dip in for lollies, right? And just that whole concept that as you do earn money, put some aside for spending, some for saving, and also for sharing if you need to buy a birthday gift or share with charity or your community. So it's just those sort of foundational things. So I don't think school financial education alone is going to make a difference. It has to be across the spectrum.
I totally agree with everything that's been said. I do believe that school should be the foundation of the delivery of financial education, though. I believe that is our best opportunity to break intergenerational financial illiteracy and to drive the greatest equitable outcomes. Home, whānau, the broader community is an opportunity to compound that growth and that capability. And so we need to make sure the lessons that are happening in the classroom are happening at home, are filtrating into the home. And also that I think those at home in the community, to your point, whether they like it or not, they are financial role models. And it's not just them, it's whatever the content they're watching on their phone or their devices as well. And those people increasingly have a greater influence over our younger generation than they ever had before, whereas in past generations it was literally mum, dad, auntie and uncle at home, which they saw. Now it's anyone, anywhere in the world, with different financial circumstances, whether they're real or not. So I think we also need to acknowledge that broader influence that youth now have.
You made a really good point there about social media and the role that's playing, because we're definitely. I'm seeing it as a parent as well. I mean, youth today they're getting their financial advice from TikTok, from Reddit, other platforms. I mean, I saw a stat that Gen Z are on TikTok on average 8 hours a day. So, but there's the risk that they're getting the wrong information, right? So how do we play a role? And I think also we need to think about how do we create the right content on those platforms and where they are at, right? In a really engaging, bite-size kind of way. So.
Yeah, I think such an important point, and I like what Simon said about schools a real opportunity to, I don't want to say push across the key messages, but we know that in our org we have a research team, we're a public entity, so we're a little bit separate and we can give good, solid research on what's going on and what's best practice in terms of teaching financial education. The school is the place where we can give a consistent message about good habits and ways and good skills and knowing what type of understandings, the key knowledge young people need to know, the skills they need to have to succeed. Then it gets compounded at home and hopefully will then counteract some of those other narratives. We've all had different upbringings and therefore that frames what we think about money and what we think is good and bad. And often that can be, I was talking about this the other day, we can have real shame associated with that. So, spending's bad. So there's shame with spending your money. We know, like you were talking about the spend, save, share jar, we know that an equal balance among that isn't a bad thing. So at schools, we have got the opportunity to provide quite consistent messaging that will lead to good financial habits. So school becomes a really critical point to counteract any of that information, particularly some of that stuff we see online at the moment.
Thank you very much. I've got a question from the panel, from Sarah. Are there financial education programs in all schools in New Zealand that you know of?
I don't think so. No, I think about ASB. So we've run our GetWise program now for 15 years. So our footprint, we've been in 70% of schools, but we can't service every single primary and intermediate school. And it's the same with, I would imagine, with Banqer, right? And so, and sorted, you've got resources, etc., available to teachers, but there are gaps. So there needs to be a shared goal, and I think we need to just put the stake in the ground and say we want to make sure every young person has access to financial education. Think about where the gaps are, how we're going to plug those gaps, do it in a really engaging way. And I think just on teachers as well, we can't assume that teachers are confident to teach kids about money. So it's also equipping. If we want teachers to do that, they need to be equipped and they need to be empowered to be able to have those, to be able to deliver those workshops with kids.
I know that in the UK, for example, it's part of the national curriculum to teach financial literacy to kids between 11 and 16 years old, all of them, across the spectrum. So maybe that's something that could be done in New Zealand, or?
Yeah, I think we're looking at some good international models, and I know the Ministry of Education is looking at some good international models as well. In terms, to go back on your question before, we know that we are primarily focused differently in the secondary school space, and our resource trains teachers to teach financial capability to their learners. We offer assessment, and it's aligned to the Ministry of Education's curriculum. I was the first one to use the curriculum word. We were talking about that before. And so we know around about 90% of schools have engaged in our product or are engaged in our product and satisfied with that. However, what we're lacking is a way to really measure the amount of time people are engaged with things, how many kids it's touched, how do we know that it's reached all of those young people? But also importantly, how do we know that what is reaching those young people is quality? I think is a really important point. How do we know that the right things are being taught to the right students? We can see something as strong and useful financial advice for example, managing your finances and how you can save and grow your money. A kid might be sitting in front of us that doesn't connect with them because we're talking about their money, your money, your actions, where they might see their money more collectively depending on the community that they're from. So the information needs to be correct and it needs to be suitable for the audience in front of us, I think is a very important point. But it's definitely out there and there's some good models, how it gets done.
I had a question also before. It died, just so you know. But the question I read before was, some kids are not fortunate enough to have necessarily good financial role models at home. Is there any kind of support that do exist or programs where there is that link also maybe to give a bit more from a family perspective? Do we know?
That's a hard one because like we spoke about, we have some work that happens in communities. That's again something that sits a little bit separate. We know that there's really great community providers out there trying to put that support into whānau and different groups of people needing extra support. However, there's no coordinated approach as to what that information is. Is that information fit for that group of people? And I think that's, if we're moving more into the adult learning space, one of the approaches we need to take is, are we creating content and learning for the people in front of us that we're trying to serve in that program? We have, like I spoke about before, our sorted kāinga ora program, our Tiri Tō Hau program, which works on working in communities with whānau and communities. Same with our Ministry for Pacific Peoples Pathway to Home Ownership program is bespoke for Pacific people to get into home ownership. There needs to be sort of not just one generic thing that can be pushed out there. There needs to be sort of a responsive approach.
Totally agree. There's no silver bullet, and I just in terms of what ASB's doing. We have got, we launched last year a program called Tiki Tiki o Putea, which is a program in Te Reo, and it's a really intensive program in Kura Kaupapa, and it's, we're seeing, and I guess how do we know it's working? Because we're seeing behavioural change, and there's different ways that we're measuring that change. But there's no one size fits all approach, so unfortunately, there's no other programs that I'm aware of out there that would be able to reach those that don't access our current programs.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, I totally agree. I mean, if there's a lack of consistency in schools around the delivery of financial education, I would suggest that the consistency in homes or in the community is worse, even less so. I think there are a range of different resources out there, some of them from anything the likes of pocket money apps via Square One, through to more community-focused initiatives. But no, I don't think there is anything across the board to support the delivery of financial education in homes.
Coming back on what we touched on earlier on the TikTok of this world, for example, where now kids can get their financial advice from that. Do you see maybe like a government or having, I don't know, celebrities or sport people or everything doing a little bit of that on TikTok or those platforms or social media to actually reach, most of the Generation Alpha?
I think we can get a little bit tricked in this space. So I'm going to credit this to Kendall from Banqer. I haven't confirmed whether it was from her or not, but it was at the NatStrat conference. I remember us talking about attention span with young people. And the assumption can be, young people have only got a short attention span. We just need to be creating content for places like TikTok. But actually, it's about capturing their attention. And it's about engaging them in that short period of time. Once you've caught them, that's when you can really engage them and help them. It's about getting them to see the value in what they're learning. I think we can fall in a trap for being like, Gen Alpha is the first completely digitally literate generation. They are going to only want to engage in digital content, but we know that they're also really socially conscious. They're really connected. They're wanting to see how things can have an impact on a global scale. They're wanting to connect with people. So at the end of the day, we can capture them in that way, and maybe that there's a place for that, but I don't necessarily think that's the place to educate them. It might be there's bite-sized pockets of learning, but actually we don't have to sort of be a bit defeatist about it and think that's the only way that we can engage them. It's about capturing them and then bringing them in after that point.
Yeah, look, I totally agree, and I think that the one to watch out for will be AI, and already, with ChatGPT, etc. GPTs are going to be the financial advisors of the future, right? Kids will be able to sort of plug in, I need a financial plan, and then their own bot will come up with advice, which will be all synthetically kind of generated. So we need to be mindful of that going forward. But again, AI can also play a positive role in terms of coming up with learning that's really adaptive for that individual, and can keep them engaged. So that's, and look, just, I know this isn't sort of answering the question, but I think a key point about the Gen Alpha and Gen Z is that quite often they have an instant view. It's a YOLO, what I call the YOLO generation, you only live once. And so even thinking about having a savings goal or buying a house or even retirement, it's, they would rather just live in the here and now. So we do need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, to the TikTok point, I think from my perspective, a lot of that is more around awareness. Seeing people that they recognise and respect talk about money, I think, is a good thing, and it piques interest. As to whether it leads to educational outcomes, I wouldn't be so confident on that, but it is a way to capture that awareness and hopefully engage them in further financial education.
On all of your programs at the moment, what would be the biggest hit with the kids? What works the best so far, you think? Is it the gamification? Is it the fact that they're engaged more?
Yeah, I can kick that one off. For us it is the gamification and simulation. So I think we bring money to life. We treat school children, whether they be 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds, like adults. They feel like they've got money. They feel like they've got a bank account. They feel like they're saving for their retirement. And I think that really resonates with them and brings it to life.
With the ASB Get Wise program, we've been getting some good results, and it's because of three things really. One, it's fun. It's delivered by not the teacher. We've got facilitators. A lot of them are actors or actually past teachers as well. So they make it really fun and engaging, and age appropriate is really, really important. But it's not just, you can teach kids 100 times, 100 lessons, but as I was saying before, if you want to have that shift in attitudes and behaviours, they need to put that into practice. So they can't just, you can be taught to act, but there's sort of a limit to how much information kids can kind of take in. They actually need to then, put it into practice, preferably with their own money.
Yeah, we see, like I said, our program's a little bit different in the way in which it operates, but we see the same thing. It's stuff that's real life, and it's it's empowering them to make decisions around money. I think the other thing that we see engagement with is, like I was talking about, we've got some resources around tax and understanding tax, because kids hear conversations about these things. They get a job, they start to see a big chunk of money come out of there, and they're wondering why. So we underestimate. We can sort of see them at that young age as just quite dismissive, but they want to know about the world. They want to know where their tax goes, or they want to know what does that bit go into the form, and what's this? They've got questions about the world. So if it can be related to their life and they've got power to make decisions themselves, I think that's where the most interest we see is. It needs to be relevant. There's no point talking to a 12-year-old about retirement. You need to word it in a way that is like, what do you want your life to be like? There was sort of some general, it's very vague research, but kind of generally accepted that you can't imagine more than double your age. So if you're asking a 12-year-old to think about what they want their retirement to look like, in reality, that's going to be completely different by the time they're there. And that's also assuming that retirement is 65 years old, stopping work, living in your own, home that you own. We have some very set ideas in our own brains about what those... We have to be careful when we're teaching young people that we're not pushing our views and experiences of money on them as well. We need to meet them where they're at. So they want to see that it's responsive to them and their community and them as a young person and what they're experiencing in their life.
So we've got another question. It's, how do you design your programs? Thinking about it from a human-centered design, how do you engage with younger kids, making sure it aligns well with them and it's meeting their needs rather than relying on our own bias?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question, because we're doing quite a bit of work at the moment around content redesign for Get Wise. We just want to make sure that it is still relevant and it is engaging, and we're testing a lot on kids, to be honest, and bringing in some really fun elements and some reward elements to the content, using real life examples in the classroom. But yeah, you need to just, there's a bit of trial and error. We've got a lot of different measures that we look at to make sure it's hitting the mark in a whole lot of different ways. But really just getting that content in front of the audience and also getting teacher feedback too is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Getting in front of students and teachers and seeing how they interact with the platform. For us, I guess, fortunate to have a strong user base throughout the country to understand what that looks like. And then I think, again, just to the earlier point around meeting them where they're at in terms of their lives, whether that be culturally, socioeconomically, geographically, or their level of education as well. And I think just making sure that we're catering for, I guess, the plethora of users is sort of at the heart of things as well.
Same goes for us. Like, we obviously deal with older learners in our programs from secondary school onwards, like I mentioned before, but really going back to research being really important, making sure there's probably three things that I'll talk about that are really important to us. It's best practice research in the financial sector, and I think that is the real benefit we have as connecting as a group for financial education, is that this is something that there's people out there that are expert in this, and that might not necessarily at all times come from the classroom. That might come from outside of that. So connecting with what's the best practice in terms of the financial sector, what's the best practice in terms of latest research around education and what we call pedagogy, meeting the young people that are in front of you. And I think from a cultural perspective is a really important one. If we're to be Te Reti honouring, we have a Māori medium program that is bespoke, made for the Māori medium education environment for kura kaupapa Māori. It's not translated from our English resources, it's made from a Te Ao Māori perspective, meeting those learners where they're at in their communities. And that often looks different to how we might work with teachers in the English medium space. So it's research in the financial sector, it's research in the education sector, and it's our own research from analysing our programs and feedback. But most importantly, meeting young people and communities where they're at.
At the moment, we see a lot of banks appointing behavioral scientists, Is it something that you think could help also if those behavioral scientists were to look at the next generation so they can start maybe having products, banking products, or that could follow them?
Yeah, I think not just in banks, but in other organisations, that work's already being done. That, like, I know within our own org, we've got expertise around that. That's something that I think this is like the assumption around financial literacy or financial education being nowhere in schools. I think the assumption is that these programs are sometimes just made because we think this is what young people should know. Let's just put it out there. But as these guys will attest to, there's a lot of stuff around behavioural science and research that goes into that.
Yeah, and just to build on that, in terms of behavioural science, what we do at the bank too is we've got nudges, what we call nudges, which are, I guess, tips, so that if we find that someone there is going into arrears and doesn't usually do that, or hasn't paid their credit card off for the month, or even if it's a savings behaviour, we will send out a nudge to them, and the nudge could be in a whole lot of different formats. And I think if we apply it to kids' financial literacy, what we're seeing globally is a real trend towards digital pocket money apps, where kids actually the parental controls on it. They get rewarded for doing chores, there's a prepaid debit card that goes with that. But what I really like about it is the behavioural science element, because there are nudges in there and there's tips. So kids and alerts, so that kids can make sure that they're keeping on track, and if they're not, or if they've been spending all their pocket money, then they will they will get a nudge to kind of get back online in terms of their goal.
We've got another question. We touched a little bit on that, but for money conversation to start happening at home, do the kids need to have them in school first? So not necessarily learning about financial literacy, but having those conversations at school, and are school the best access point?
I would just say you need to start young. Have those conversations with kids as young as possible. Even I've seen research that says even a 3 or a 4-year-old should know what coins look like, be able to identify notes, and more importantly, distinguish between something that is a need versus a want. So it's really important for my survival versus actually I just want this. So I think conversations need to happen in the home, and those behaviours starting to get formed in the home. But then I think financial education in schools provides this really super important layer, particularly for those kids that might not be getting, just not getting talked about in the home. At least they are building those foundational skills.
I think the first point I would make is financial conversations are happening in the home. I would say almost all the time. It's where the kids are part of those conversations that's the big difference. And so, like Shelley was saying, research says as early as possible, get them amongst those conversations, get them amongst decision making where appropriate. But I think the thing that schools can do that home can't is remove some layers around that. So often with talking about money in the home, there's financial baggage associated with that. There is emotional baggage associated with that. There's well-being. They can see the physical effects it's having on the family, the emotional effects. In schools, we're able to kind of remove that a little bit if we design programs well. We're able to help them understand money and how money works without the emotional tie from when they're seeing it in the home. That's the role of school, really, is to unpack the world around them in a bit more of a neutral setting. So I think school plays a vital role in making sure we introduce certain concepts, certain bits of knowledge, certain skills, but those are conversations are happening in the home regardless.
And maybe by the kids having those conversations at school, they can bring that to their home as well, and maybe start talking to their parents about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that as well. We often hear about conversations coming back from the classroom into the house, and those conversations can start around a dinner table, and that maybe one child is getting financial education at school, whereas another isn't, and it allows that to sort of, grow around the family.
Awesome. I've got another question. It's a long one. Bear with me. Gen Z and millennials have been portrayed as disengaged and not optimistic about their long-term financial outcomes because they don't feel like they have the power or opportunity to succeed in the economic system we have created for them. Do you believe that this disengagement is because of a lack of education through schooling, which has improved with Gen Alpha, or have they become disengaged post-schooling as they perceive more about the state of the economy? If so, how do we prevent Gen Alpha from becoming disengaged even after being taught well in schools?
It's a good one. As a millennial, I would say it wasn't school's fault for disengaging me, but I think school could have done a lot better in terms of helping me understand. I learnt through mistakes, and I didn't have the modelling at home to make positive financial decisions. I didn't see all I saw that was that money caused stress. So as an adult, I worked my way through that process. If I had come out of the schooling system with the tools, with the financial knowledge, the capital, to be able to have agency and make decisions and make positive decisions early on. Simple things like KiwiSaver. It took till I started working for the Commission to be like, why am I only contributing that much? Or why is my fund not more aggressive? But if I'd had the opportunity to unpack some of those ideas, learn the skills, pick up on the key informations and get rid of all the disinformation that I was hearing elsewhere, I probably would have made better decisions earlier. So I think we have been missing the bar there in terms of giving them those opportunities of knowledge to make decisions.
Yeah, I definitely think in terms of millennials, there was a generation there that missed out on financial education in schools. I think there was a gap, and I think that's in part reflective of when the three organisations on the stage started probably being more active in schools. I don't think that's to say the millennials aren't engaged in money and totally pessimistic. I think they're maybe just engaging differently, and that reflects a different culture for them as well. Like, experiences are valued over assets, so they are spending their money doing things rather than savings toward a house. They are interested in alternative investment vehicles, so then maybe not engaging with the financial system in the same way that prior generations have done. So yeah, I think it is different for millennials, but I think we are also just engaging differently.
Yeah, and I think another key factor is housing affordability. The reality is a lot of millennials, even Alpha and Gen Z, feel that they will never ever be able to own their own home. So what's the point really in saving? So yeah, and I we've done some research at ASB around financial wellbeing, and it's actually, we were talking about it actually prior to the session, but it's really quite interesting. And what we're seeing is that 50% of our customer base between the ages of 18 to 24 do not have $1,000 saved. So they have less than $1,000. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So for a rainy day, there's just nothing to fall back on. And then with our wider base, it's a little higher. But if you think, half of young adults are not saving, and they don't have enough money in their savings account, then that's going to lead to worse outcomes for them overall. So how do we kind of get them into those savings behaviours early on? So by the time they hit 18, they are saving. They're putting something away, right? It might not be a house that they're saving for, but at least it's something that that fits with their beliefs.
Thank you very much. Another question. Do you see issues in the increasing gamification of money and how young people may perceive money they cannot physically handle, and how could that be mitigated if there are any issues?
I think we know that research shows that physically handling money is really critical to understanding of money. That may not be possible in all circumstances, but if we have the ability, particularly at those much younger ages, to introduce concepts around money with the physical handling of money, that is helpful. But all kids aren't going to have that experience. We know that there's a connection, much like I'll often talk about with literacy. Handwriting is actually an important vehicle to literacy. There's a brain connection that causes some good understanding in terms of shape of words, sound, phonics, reading, all that sort of thing. It's the same with money, but there's also ways to do that digitally. So we have to move with the times in that sense. We were talking the other day about the tooth fairy, like when someone loses a tooth, the tooth fairy at my house has been like given out $20 because the only thing open at 11 p.m. is the cash machine down the road. Then there's no coins sitting around the house. So I think that we have to come to grips with the fact that digital money is what our kids are dealing with, and gamifying things doesn't necessarily mean tending towards sort of a gambling nature. I think I'll hand that one to you, Simon, about gamification and how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, to your point around introducing tactile money first, that's what we still recommend in our primary school product, is starting off with money recognition, whether that be printouts of notes and coins. So students start with that basic understanding that the tactile thing is the same as the abstract thing on the computer. So to my mind, that is still a really strong and important starting point. And then that sort of reinforces the fact that the thing they're seeing online is money. It does have value. It does take a little while for students to comprehend that. With our primary school platform, there is the ability for a teacher to enable students to be able to transact between one another. And what we often find is if a teacher enables that straight away, before students have associated with worth with this fictitious money, albeit in their bank accounts, they go wild. They just transfer money all over the place to the favourite kid in the class, the cool kid, whatever. Whereas if they get the opportunity to understand that number holds value and that can get them something in the world, then they deal with it more maturely and responsibly. So yeah, I think the tactile nature of money is still fundamental and still a really important aspect.
I think what Simon's touched on as well is what's really important, and what we've all said is work well in our classrooms or in our programs, is giving them experiences, and they have to have the experiences of wasting that money. That's part of the learning journey. I think we can also come from a place with children in Gen Alpha where we want to shelter them from the world and don't want to watch them make those mistakes. I always use my son as an example of letting him blow $200 in vouchers on Roblox on one day because he was given them by his grandparents, and that was a hard learning curve. And I could have interjected, but I didn't, because I knew that was an important thing for him to do, and we can do that digitally. I think we can sometimes make it out as doing things digitally with money and letting them play around with it is a bad thing, but there's really important learnings that come from that we can't let them have with real money.
Yeah, good point. Look, just my only comment would be that the formats evolved a lot. I mean, I think about what we had in the early days and some of our Get Wise lessons. It was just PDFs and they were fine, and kids were, able to fill out, the PDFs, and that's all good. Gamification's really important now, and just having digital tools available. And look, I think brands also are appearing more in gaming experiences too, which is interesting. I know my son's on Fortnite a lot, and all sorts of information is coming up there, and so. Yeah, and it won't take long until there'll be financial literacy information probably coming through too.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, I think ensuring that educational outcomes are the outcome of gamification is, I think, the important thing. Gamification for gamification's sake, to keep a student or a child engaged is one thing, but to actually have educational outcomes is a really important aspect. And to your point, Yasmin, I think gamification allows students to make mistakes, and I think if we all reflect on our lives, whether they be financial or otherwise, probably our greatest learnings are from our greatest mistakes. So if we can allow an environment, albeit in a classroom, where students can make mistakes in a gamified and simulated environment, and then wrap around the education to that, then that has the opportunity for the best outcomes. I remember I went on a school visit at one stage and was met at the primary school office by a young boy and sort of asked him how Banqer was going. And as we walked to the class, he explained that he had a job in Banqer, or he had a side hustle, and effectively he was a loan shark. Not great role modelling, but entrepreneurial. But to me, if his classmates are getting ripped off by him in class in primary school, they're probably not going to do it later in life. So not a bad thing necessarily.
You are talking of the importance of the physical money. So what do you think of cashless societies? And how do you bring that into your education?
I think that comes back to giving them opportunities to learn about the cashless systems they work within. And so I think, and some of those, the old beep beep culture where they're not seeing one of our colleagues was talking about this the other day, I'm trying to think of who it was, who was talking about letting her child's card decline because they were just beep beep beeping without thinking about it. But so actually letting them have those opportunities where they fail on a smaller scale. But we need to introduce things into our programs, and I think all of us very much do, that address some of those sort of online money worries, whether it be addressing the idea of like safe investing, keeping them away from like pyramid schemes, because that's still just rampant on social media, whether it's looking at Afterpay and what does that look like when you're not physically handing that cash over, whether it's looking at the power of compound interest, but also the power of interest accruing against you, helping them have those experiences because they're not going to be able to do that so physically.
Yeah, and I think about ASB, and obviously, yes, we are in a cashless society, and we're transacting more online. We did have a electronic money box called Clever Cash, and I don't know in this room who's familiar with Clever Cash. We no longer offer it, but what was so great about it was that there was an app connected to it, and so kids would swipe their coins from the physical belly of this elephant, and they'd swipe it, and they would be able to see straight away on their parents' app into their account. That was where the money was going, and so they weren't getting physical money; they were getting virtual money, right? But they were actually seeing that, hey, their savings balance was going up as a result. And like I was saying before, the global trend is towards digital pocket money apps. So where you still get that, that concept of money you need to earn to be able to get money loaded on your prepaid debit card, and then you use your card, but you understand the process a lot more. But yeah, the reality is we are cashless, and unfortunately, you just can't beat physical notes and coins.
And you can't, we can be scared of it. It's like when everyone was scared of the internet for a while. It's like people were scared of telephones. You can't be scared of something that's happening. We just need to adapt to change, and it's about teaching them those systems and integrating that into our programs. We can't just say, it's like me saying, every parent should be dealing with their kids with physical cash. And I would be lying if I said I was good at that with my own 4 children. So, like, we just need to adapt.
Absolutely.
From my perspective, I don't know if being a cashless society is the main challenge, particularly when it comes to secondary school students. It's maybe more the differentiation between fiat currency and cryptocurrency, and a regulated financial market and non. And I think for a lot of young people, particularly teenagers, cryptocurrencies, the allure of that's fairly exciting. So having them understand how that differs to the money on your debit card, I think is a really key important concept as well.
Yeah, and it is risky, right? Crypto it comes with a lot of risk, but also what we're seeing is buy now, pay now. What is it? Buy now, pay later, schemes. The number of young people that have signed up to multiple afterpays and are falling into that debt trap a lot earlier than previous generations would have.
And for me, that's sort of reflective of one of the big challenges that the next generation faces is the sort of accessibility and the complexity of financial products, like buy now, pay later, the ease with which students can invest, like the shares and whatnot. While that accessibility is great, there also is an educational burden with that as well that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, I think it's like not just teaching young people the mechanics of money. I think that's why we see financial concepts come into different subjects in schools, because it's not just about the stuff, it's not just about the mechanics, it's not just about the math, it's also about some of the key concepts like risk, teaching young people about risk. And we know when we teach very, very young kids about money, it's about looking at what do you value and how do you protect that, or what's exchange. There's concepts that you need to teach young people when looking at money, as well as just the hard, fast facts and numbers.
We've got, I think it's almost time to break out, but if you had each, like, I don't know, a magic wand or something that you could do for New Zealand kids, what would you do?
I would create a core competency framework of what financial education looks like at different phases in life, that connects all the amazing people doing that work and helps schools, the sector support that, so we can ensure, like all of us have talked about, that young people, that financial education is touching all young people, just not the ones that are lucky enough.
For me, it is ensuring that every child gets access to quality financial education. And to do that, there needs to be a shared goal, an ecosystem of partners coming and working together on what that looks like. And so if we want to affect change, I think that's the key thing.
I'd just do that. Nothing further to add. Seems pretty easy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.